Hi, everybody. We're going to read some more A Night Divided. There's Shirley. Jeffrey's right there. We're going to start at chapter 26. The next day was a Sunday, which gave us some much-needed time at home to rest, bathe away at least 5 layers of caked-on dirt, and gulp down the food from Anna's mother as if we hadn't seen anything edible for weeks. The tunnel had made us both noticeably thinner, but we were also both more muscular in our arms and shoulders. While I liked feeling stronger, I also knew it was important for us to eat enough to avoid looking like we were in the process of starving. People had begun staring at us lately, and stares invited questions. Questions led to gossip, which surely ended up in the form of reports at Stasi headquarters. Fritz and I had chosen to dedicate the day to pleasing the hidden microphones. We talked about how grateful we were to have the allotment of land and how much we were learning about gardening. We spoke of missing our mother, but being proud of her for taking care of Oma Gertrude and not burdening the state. We discussed Fritz's enthusiasm to join the military at the end of the month, and my hopes to get more responsibility from the pioneers this fall. Maybe we laid it on a little thick. No doubt some of what we said brought groans from whoever was tasked with listening to us. But these conversations were only a game now. If there were any consequences for our overworked chatter, we didn't care. We wouldn't be around to face them. Fritz and I worked together to get the apartment cleaned up, but we were both delaying the worst job of all, the laundry. It had piled up over the last week and a half to something on the scale of a small mountain. Our clothes were dirty and smelly and so stiff with sweat that they practically held their shape after we removed them. The sheets from our beds were even worse. It was bad enough now that I sometimes woke up in the morning with new dirt on my face from having slept on it last night. "We have to wash these," I said, "but if we hang them up now, they won't be dry by bedtime, and once we return from the garden tomorrow, they'll only get dirty again." "It's too bad the washing can't get done for us while we're gardening." "Yeah, Then I stopped as an idea snapped in my head, like someone had flipped on a light. Suddenly, I knew exactly how we'd get rid of the dirt. I looked over at Fritz and saw a mischievous gleam in his eyes. We had the same solution in mind. I was sure of it. "The pond next to the garden," Fritz said. I grinned. That was exactly my idea. On our way to the welcome building the next morning, Fritz and I stopped by a lumber shop for more wood and rope, and a handful of nails, all for a clothesline. It would take much of the day to build, but it was absolutely worth it. While Fritz nailed the wood together to make 2 small T's, I dug 2 deep holes in the ground, about 10 meters apart. We chose the spot carefully, exactly parallel to the Berlin Wall and in front of the pond. Then we set the posts into the ground and filled it back in with dirt. Our posts weren't quite straight, and Fritz said they'd probably tip over in the next big wind, but I thought they were good enough for our purposes. We ran rope between them. It sagged a little, and the longer fabrics might brush against the dirt, but that was fine by me. It was time for a test. I carried a bucket of dirt from the building with a single bedsheet on top. If the guards were watching, they'd see me wash that sheet in the pond and then hang it on the clothesline to dry. With the sheet blocking their view, I would then empty the dirt into the pond. Then back to the building for another load of dirt and another sheet to be washed. With the second sheet on the clothesline, I had even better cover from the guards. There was plenty of laundry to be done and endless loads of dirt to be emptied. Fritz and I worked that way throughout the week. By the end of the week, he was 10 meters in, but we were also slowing down. It took time to walk the piles of dirt from so deep within the tunnel back out to the air raid shelter. And it took me more time to empty the dirt because now I had to sneak the dirt out from the building and get it to the pond, then wash and hang sheets on those trips. And we both had to put in time on the garden because it was almost certain that at some point someone would drive by to check on us. Fritz and I began working longer hours, arriving as early as possible in the mornings and staying as late as we could at night. We were barely sleeping, eating as little as we could to get by, and working. Always working. Occasionally, on our trips to the Welcome Building, we walked past the platform where I had seen Dominic and Papa, but they were never there anymore. I wished they were. I wanted to let them know that we were digging, as Papa wanted. I tried to remain patient, though, and keep focused on the fact that at least I tried to remain patient, though, and keep focused on the fact that at least we were moving deeper each day. The problem was, as Fritz pointed out, that his 18th birthday was coming up soon, exactly 3 weeks from now. That was our absolute deadline to be finished. We weren't sure how much farther we had to dig, but it was a long way. Nor could we just walk away if we didn't finish it in time. The tunnel had progressed far enough that eventually it would be discovered. And when the Grenzers found it, figuring out who had dug it would be the simplest of mysteries. If we don't finish, we need a backup plan for escape, Fritz said. The second we began digging this tunnel, we committed ourselves to leaving, one way or another. We're not swimming the Spree, I said. That had been a bad idea weeks ago, and it was no better now. Fritz gritted his teeth. We can tie ourselves together with a rope so we can help each other against the current. All the easier for one of us to pull the other underwater. And what about Mama? We're not leaving her behind. Then what's our backup plan? Fritz wasn't as angry as he sounded. It was only the same frustration as I felt too. Everything else is far more dangerous. We can't jump over the wall. 3 of us can't be smuggled across the border at once. And we know how that idea ended for Peter. So what do we do? I stood up and dipped the bucket in the dirt again to carry more of it outside. We'll finish this tunnel, Fritz. We'll finish this tunnel as if our lives depend on it. Because now they do. By the beginning of our 3rd week of digging, we had washed every sheet in the apartment at least 10 times. And since the pond was constantly being flushed with dirt, the water was hardly clean. The sheets looked worse and worse with each washing. I figured that was good news. It gave me an excuse to pull them down and wash them again, along with more hidden dirt from my bucket, of course. If my mother saw those sheets, which were now only white in the past tense, she would be horrified. But I couldn't have been happier with their lack of progress. Chapter 27. A small package arrived the next morning from the post. It was labeled for me and had a return address and writing on it that I didn't recognize. The package was marked as seeds. Who'd be sending us seeds? Fritz asked. The package had been opened already, and the Stasi inspection stamp was on the outside. But it didn't look like they had gone through it with anything more than a cursory examination. 7 envelopes of seeds were inside, all of them for squash. Squash? Fritz wrinkled his nose. Who would ever want so much squash? Papa would, I replied. It was his favorite vegetable. Fritz sat beside me. Did this package come from... Then he remembered we were bugged and changed his question. From anyone we know? For the benefit of the microphones, I said, "I sent away for some seeds to help with the garden." Then I poured the envelopes out onto the table. Fritz and I tore open each one, but they contained only seeds. I felt beyond disappointed. Surely this package had come from my father, but I had expected more from him. When I said we needed money to help with gardening, he should have read more into that note. We didn't need seeds, and certainly not this many seeds for squash. Or worse, maybe he did send money and the Stasi had inspected it. Or worse, maybe he did send money and the Stasi had inspected it straight out of my package. Frustrated, I picked up the wrapping to crumple it up for the garbage, but then I heard something rattle inside. I opened it again and saw one more package of seeds that was stuck in the seal. I pulled it out and made some comment about it being even more stupid squash seeds. But this envelope was different. It still rattled with the seeds inside, but not as easily, and it was thicker than the others. I opened it and saw it was stuffed with ostmarks. I wasn't sure how much was in there, but probably more than we would spend in a month. My eyes filled with tears, and Fritz's too. But he shook them away and in a cheery voice said, "Well, I suppose we're planting squash then. That was smart, Gerta, to write and ask for those seeds. By late fall, we'll have plenty of food for as many people as might want it." As we walked to the welcome building that morning, Fritz and I discussed what we should do with the money. I wanted to buy enough food to stock our cupboards again, but Fritz felt we ought to have a wheelbarrow to haul dirt. "The buckets don't carry enough dirt with each load, and it takes too many trips in and out of the building, which is dangerous. A wheelbarrow would be better." "Papa sent that money for food," I protested. We were living on so little these days that lately my hunger won out in any argument. "No, he sent that money for us, and we need a wheelbarrow more than we need cheese and sausages." I disagreed. I'd rather have bought 100 fat sausages with it, or better yet, a fine yellow banana from the black market. I carried my hunger everywhere with me, even into my dreams lately. Mama had said there was a lot of starvation at the end of the Second World War, but I never really understood what that meant. Not until the last few days. Now, every time my stomach rumbled and I had nothing to comfort it, I understood why she was always worried about having enough food. In the end, Fritz won the argument, and we bought a small wheelbarrow on our way there. I'd have still rather had the banana. At least it made hauling the dirt easier. While he dug, I used the bucket to empty dirt from the basement into the wheelbarrow outside, all blocked from view of the watchtower. Then I put another sheet on top and walked it over to the pond. With fewer trips, I was removing far more dirt than ever before. For much of the day, though, Fritz weeded and planted Papa's seeds while I continued removing dirt. It slowed down our work in the tunnel, but if the guards were watching from their tower, they'd need to see progress in this garden every day. Late that afternoon, I was on my way to the pond with another load of dirt, covered over with the 2 sheets from my bed, when a green Trabant Kubel with the wold Volksy Policy drove up. 2 police officers were inside. I froze in place while Fritz's head shot up and he jumped to his feet. I looked at him. Should we run for it? Where would we possibly go? Keep working. Fritz's voice was terse. Wait until they're not looking and then empty the wheelbarrow. But let them see you wash the sheets. Just pretend that everything is normal. We're gardening. That's all. I put my head down and continued walking toward the pond. I suddenly felt exposed, like spotlights were pointing down at me, revealing to the world every secret I've ever tried to hide. The secret right in front of me. Why did a girl need a wheelbarrow to haul only 2 sheets? Why did her muscles strain if the load was only a lightweight cotton? Why did she insist on cleaning in a pond that sent the sheets out dirtier than when they went in? The two officers left their car fully armed and surveyed the lot like they already knew we were up to something. Truly, how could they miss the glaring signs of what we were really doing here? For as careful as we thought we had been, it all looked so obvious to me now. Fritz hailed the officers and walked out to meet them as far from the pond as possible. He invited them over to inspect our garden patch and brought them with him to the opposite side of the clothesline, leaving me free to quickly dump the wheelbarrow full of dirt. It plopped into the water far too loudly, and soon I heard the footsteps of one of the officers coming my way. Guten Tag. I saw white blonde hair and immediately recognized the officer as the one who had put his rifle against my cheek several weeks ago. Mueller. That same rifle was still slung over his shoulder, but he also carried a sidearm pistol on his right hip. He had frightened me then, and as much as I wanted to hide my fear this time, my legs were already shaking. Guten Tag, I answered. My tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't friendly either. I know you, he said. You're the girl who watches the wall on her way to school. It's hard to miss the wall, sir. He chuckled, but only for a brief moment. Perhaps. But there are some who glance at the wall, and others who seem to study it. I had no way to answer that, and I panicked for a moment. My eyes darted over to Fritz, wishing he were here to help me. But Officer Mueller didn't seem to notice and only turned to face the garden. We have come to have a look at your Schrebergarten to see your progress on this land. We planted squash and corn this week, I said. June is too late for planting. Nothing will grow by the time the frost returns. It took us longer than we thought to clear the ground, sir. I kept my head down, always at work washing the sheet in my hands. Yes, we expected to see more than this. Mueller started to walk away, and I leapt from the pond to follow him. Fritz was already showing the other officer around the field, but there wasn't much to see. I worried that Mueller might get bored and wander to investigate the building. The window we used to get inside was closed and locked, as if it was nailed up just like the others. But of course it wasn't. A firm push would open it and reveal our two-faced plan. Are you a gardener? I asked, following behind him. Maybe you can give us some advice. How long do you spend in this garden each day? He ignored my question, which meant he had no interest in polite conversation, and he was walking directly toward the welcome building. It varies. Often in the heat of the day, we rest in the shade. You are working this ground on behalf of the state, not for your own pleasure, Mueller said. If you are uncomfortable on warm days, we can find others who want the work. The state isn't paying us to be here, sir, I said, only allowing us the use of the land. He turned to me. The state does not need to pay you. You will expect some of this harvest, I assume. That is your pay. I lowered my head and held a tone of humility. Yes, sir. I'd have thrown in 100 more sirs if it helped. When Mueller marched on, still walking toward the building, I glanced back at Fritz for assistance. What was I supposed to do if Mueller tried to get inside? But Fritz couldn't do anything to help. He was showing the other officer our permit for the land and answering whatever questions came at him. It was up to me to keep Mueller away from the building. But how could I? Mueller wasn't tall enough to see into the long upper windows, and like Fritz, he had to crouch to be low enough for the 3 windows at ground level. He stopped at the first window, one that was actually boarded up at least. He pulled out his flashlight and shone it through the cracks in the wood. Luckily, Fritz had filled in the largest gaps with extra wood, and I had gotten rid of most of the dirt that had been in there. The metal door for the air raid shelter was closed and covered in a scuff of dirt, so he shouldn't be able to see it, and Fritz's pulley system was laid on its end in the far corner of the room. With only a flashlight, I doubted Mueller would be able to see anything more than some fallen boards. "Do you ever go in here?" Mueller asked me. "It doesn't look safe to enter," I said. "The building is old and probably was bombed at one point. It looks like the whole thing might collapse soon." Actually, I didn't worry a bit about that happening. But I hoped he would believe it might collapse on him and decide to stay out. "Are there any doors to get inside?" I shrugged. "We're at the back of the building. The front would be on the other side of that wall. Perhaps you could access a door there if you're allowed." "Of course I'm allowed," he snapped, "but the entrance on that end is bricked over. What is your name?" If I thought there was any chance to get away with it, I'd have lied to him. But it was too easy to check my story. "Gerta Low, sir. I'm 12 years old and live about 5 blocks away with my mother and brother." "Does your mother approve of your gardening?" "She doesn't know. She's out of town caring for my grandmother. We hoped to make this garden a surprise for her when she comes home." He arched an eyebrow. "Gerta Low. Is your father Aldous Low? I've seen his file." I hesitated. What else could I do but answer? "Yes, sir. But he lives in the West. We have no contact with him anymore." As soon as I said it, I could have kicked myself for that lie. Only that morning, we had received Papa's package. If Mueller checked my story, he would return with more questions. Or more officers. "Your father did not believe in communism. He felt that it was only a matter of time before the GDR collapsed." "You'd have to ask my father about his beliefs, sir. I was very young when he left." Except, of course, that he had taught me everything he believed. Mueller stared down at me, and I felt like squirming beneath his gaze. "Only 12 years old. You seem older." With my father in the West and my mother at work, or with my grandmother, I've had to grow up fast. Mueller's attention returned to the building. "So, is there a way inside here or not?" My eye flicked to the window we used, but I quickly looked anywhere else. "We wouldn't know, sir." Mueller walked down and leaned over to tap on the middle window. Then he took another step toward the third window, the one that Fritz and I used. Once he pushed it, he would know. He would see what we were doing, and if I tried to stop him, that would only make things worse. I could try to run, but I wouldn't get more than a few steps away before he'd draw his gun. "Officer Mueller," his companion called. "We just got a call to investigate something farther down. It's probably a bird caught in the wires again, but we need to check it out." "Yes, sir," Mueller called back. "I hope the next time you come we'll have corn and squash to offer you." He must have detected the fake cheerfulness in my voice. Mueller stared at me again. Was my face as flushed as it felt? I could hardly keep two thoughts together, and there was so much sweat on my palms that if I brushed them against my clothes, I knew it would leave marks. He frowned at me, then walked and tapped at the third window with the butt of his rifle. Mueller had pushed the inside of the window with the hinges attached. It knocked open the boards only by a hair, but they did open, and I was sure if I noticed, he must have too. "Officer Mueller!" his companion called again, more sternly this time. If Mueller had crouched here like he did for the others, he might have seen the boards separate from the wall. But instead, he told me to stay ready, the slogan for all young people, and walk away. A minute later, his vehicle vanished down the road. Whew. I collapsed onto the dirt, so full of fear that I could scarcely breathe. Fritz came over and knelt beside me. "Are you all right?" "No!" I was fighting back hysterics. "He was right here, Fritz! Another second! One more step!" "Just breathe." Fritz put a hand on my back and rubbed it. "Take some breaths, Gerta. We're all right." But I still couldn't get enough air. All I wanted was to yell loud enough to get the fear out of my body. He had to know something was wrong. Our story doesn't make sense. There are too many holes, too much that doesn't come together. But they did believe it, and they did go away. We knew they'd come at some point, and now they're gone. It's over. It's not over, Fritz. Down to my bones, I knew it wasn't over. There would be more visits and more questions. Harder questions designed to trap us. Ones we couldn't answer. This would never be over. Chapter 28. Fritz and I spent the following morning in the tunnel. He had hit more rock, but he didn't want to move sideways again. "I worry that we're tunneling at an angle," he said. "If we don't stay straight, we'll cost ourselves weeks of extra work." So we dug out what rock we could and made the path only as wide as it absolutely had to be for a body to squeeze through. I thought about Mama here, whether she would feel comfortable in such a closed-off area. Fritz and I were used to it, but when we brought her down here, she might not like the feeling of being in a dark and narrow tunnel so far below the ground. After several hours' work, we got past the rock, and Fritz helped me haul what we had removed up to the surface. I was reluctant to use the wheelbarrow again. It had been such a close call with Officer Mueller yesterday, but I wouldn't be able to get the rocks outside otherwise. I was on my way to the pond with a load of middle-sized rocks and some dirt, all covered over with one of Mama's sheets, when I stopped. Another visitor was coming. Anna. She was alone today and wore capri pants and a sturdy button-down shirt. Gardening clothes. Even her brown boots were different from her usual pair. In one hand was a basket that I knew must contain a day's supply of food and water, and in her other hand was a small shovel. I quietly groaned, and I set the wheelbarrow down. "Guten Tag," she called to me. "It looks like you've already had another hard day of work." "We have," I said. "We're probably going to quit for the day, in fact." "We?" Anna looked around. "Where's Fritz today?" Her voice turned skeptical. "Another errand?" "Yes." I knew that didn't reflect well on Fritz, but what choice did I have? Anna pressed her eyebrows together. "He leaves the hard work for you too often. I don't usually see him working here. Only you." My mouth suddenly went dry, so much that I had trouble speaking. "You've been watching us?" She laughed, with no idea of how serious my question had been. "Only when passing by the alley, that's all. Anyway, I told you I would come to help, and my mother said I could stay as long as I wanted. I'm looking forward to it." Her eyes darted to the clothesline. "You started doing your laundry here too? That's odd." We have running water and room to hang the clothes when they're cleaned. It's better than our washer back at home. Anna walked with me over to the sheets to inspect them better. Are you sure about that? I don't mean to be rude, Gerta. I know you're doing your best with your mother gone, but these aren't that clean. I am doing my best, I said defensively. She wasn't being unkind. It's just that she had no idea of how tired I was, how hungry I was, and how frightened I was every minute of the day that we would be discovered. If I were any more tired or hungry or afraid, I would spend every waking minute crying, and every moment of sleep racked by nightmares. But as it was, my senses were constantly on alert when we were here, and I fell into such deep sleeps at night that I couldn't remember if I still dreamed anymore. I'm sorry, Anna said. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I came to help, really. And I can pull weeds or water the plants or help you with the wash, whatever you want. I brought food we can share, even enough for Fritz if he returns. And I thought we could talk and catch up. I tried not to look as sad as I felt while I stared at her. Of course I wanted our friendship back. I missed her as much as I missed my parents and Dominic. In some ways, maybe more, because up until a couple of months ago, she had known me better than almost anyone in the world. And it would have been wonderful to have her company here through the long afternoons. Except for the times when I was down in the tunnel with Fritz, or he was up here with me, this was lonely work. But it was impossible to allow Anna to stay. Fritz couldn't leave the building while she was here, and I wouldn't be able to empty the dirt or even touch the wheelbarrow right behind me. The first thing she'd try to do if I accepted her help would be to peel off the sheet from the wheelbarrow to wash it. And then she'd see what a fraud the entire clothesline really was. I appreciate your offer, but Fritz and I really want to do this by ourselves. I had to be firm, but tried to be polite as well. More than ever before, I still wanted her as a friend. Oh, I did hurt your feelings. Anna frowned. I truly am sorry. The laundry is fine, Gerta. It's hard to do so much on your own. I'm not on my own, I said. I have my brother with me, and my mother will be home soon. Thank you for asking, but we don't need help. I swallowed hard and added, we don't want it. I'm trying to get our friendship back. Anna's face flushed as if she were holding back tears. I'm trying, Gerta. But my face had turned to stone, just as hers used to do. It's too late for that. Oh, all right. Anna's eyes darted around as if she wasn't sure what to do next. I had never been so rude, and even if I'd punched her, I couldn't have hurt her worse. She lowered her head and backed off the lot. Well, goodbye then. I stood in place until she disappeared down the alley. Only when I was sure I was alone did I wheel the dirt and sheet to the pond and start the wash again. This time I needed more privacy than ever from the road and from the watchtower and even from Fritz, because I was certain I had just lost a friend forever, and the sadness of that was more than I could bear. I'll make another video today.